Hey everyone, and welcome back to Investing Talk podcast.
Glad to be here.
Today we're taking a look at Verastem.
Ticker symbol VSTM.
That's right.
This is a biotech company that has really been grabbing headlines,
Yeah, they've been making some serious moves in the world of cancer treatment.
especially with their focus on low-grade serous ovarian cancer, or LGSOC.
And with some recent action from the FDA, things are getting pretty interesting for Verastem.
The FDA actually just accepted Verastem's new drug application.
So they're a combination therapy for LGSOC,
Yeah, and not only that, but the FDA also granted it priority review status.
which for anyone who's not super familiar with how the FDA works is a pretty big deal.
It definitely is. It basically means the FDA sees a lot of potential in this therapy, and they're putting it on the fast track for review.
Exactly. And they've even set a target decision date for June 30th, 2025.
And as you can imagine, this news sent Verastem stock soaring.
Up almost 41% in a single day.
Yeah, it hit $4.58 a share after that announcement.
But before we get too caught up in the stock price, let's dive into the science a bit.
Sure.
Verastem is targeting what are called KRAS mutant cancers.
Which are notoriously difficult to treat.
Can you break that down for us a little?
So basically, KRAS is a gene that can mutate, and when it does, it can cause cancer cells to grow out of control.
These mutations pop up in a lot of different types of cancer.
And they're usually associated with more aggressive disease and a worse outlook for patients.
So finding a treatment that effectively targets these KRAS mutations has been a huge challenge in oncology.
It really has. That's why Verastem's work here is so potentially significant.
So we're talking potentially groundbreaking stuff.
Yeah.
And their phase 2 trial results seem to support that,
Yeah, the trial showed a 44% overall response rate.
meaning the therapy was able to shrink tumors in almost half of the patients.
Pretty impressive results, especially when you consider how tough it is to treat KRAS mutant cancers.
Of course, we have to keep in mind that this is still phase 2 data, so they'll need to confirm these findings in larger phase 3 trials,
Exactly. But still, those initial results are definitely promising.
especially for patients with LGSOC.
Especially because this combination therapy could be the first treatment specifically designed for that type of cancer.
It's a potential game changer.
Mhm.
And Wall Street seems to agree.
A lot of analysts are buzzing about Verastem's potential.
Some are even predicting that they could end up dominating a big chunk of the LGSOC treatment market.
And those projections show that market could be worth a whopping $363.7 million by 2034.
That's huge. So if Verastem's therapy gets approved, the financial rewards could be significant.
Absolutely. There's a lot of potential upside here.
And we're seeing that reflected in some of the recent analyst upgrades.
Yeah, like BTIG.
They've bumped up their price target for Verastem stock all the way from $13 to $20.
And they're keeping their buy rating.
Other analysts, like those at B. Riley and Mizuho Securities, have also raised their price targets.
It's definitely a sign of growing confidence in Verastem.
But of course, we always need to take analyst opinions with a grain of salt.
Absolutely. They're just one piece of the puzzle.
Now let's talk about Verastem's financial picture. They're not profitable yet, right?
Not yet. Yeah.
In their latest quarter, they reported a loss of $24 million.
Which isn't unusual for a biotech company at this stage.
They're still heavily investing in research and development.
Exactly. And they're working towards that big potential payoff if and when their drug hits the market.
But the key is having enough cash on hand to keep things running smoothly until then.
And it looks like Verastem is in a decent position there,
Yeah, they have a cash pile of $113.2 million.
which should be enough to fund their operations through mid-2025.
That gives them some breathing room to navigate the FDA approval process and potentially launch their new treatment.
Exactly. Without having to worry about raising more capital right away.
Okay, I think we've covered a lot of ground here,
Mm,
but there's so much more to explore with Verastem.
absolutely. We've only just scratched the surface.
So stay tuned, everyone. We'll be right back after a short break to continue our deep dive into Verastem.
Welcome back to Investing Talk podcast.
We're digging deeper into Verastem, ticker symbol VSTM.
Trying to figure out if it might be a good fit for your portfolio.
Right. So before we jump back into the specifics of Verastem, I think it's important to take a step back and think about the overall market.
I agree. We can't really analyze a company in isolation.
Right. We have to look at the bigger picture.
Exactly. The market as a whole had a strong year in 2024.
Yeah, the Nasdaq, the S&P 500, the Dow Jones.
All saw solid gains.
And while most analysts are optimistic about continued growth in 2025, They are predicting a slightly more moderate pace.
especially for small cap and mid cap stocks.
And just as a reminder for our listeners, Verastem falls into that small cap category.
Yes, it does. So keeping an eye on those broader market trends,
Can really help us make sense of Verastem's stock performance.
which has been pretty volatile lately.
Yeah. You could say that we saw that big jump when the FDA news broke.
Right.
But the stock has also been fluctuating quite a bit.
It has. Over the past few months, Verastem stock has been bouncing between about $3 and $6 a share.
And as of January 3rd, 2025, it's sitting around $6.93.
Right. And while the stock is down about 54% year to date,
Yeah.
it's actually up 24.5% over the past 6 months.
So it has shown some resilience despite all the ups and downs.
It has.
So what are some of the things driving these fluctuations?
Well, there are a few factors at play. First, there's just the inherent volatility of the biotech sector.
Right. Biotech stocks are known for their big swings.
Exactly. They're very sensitive to news and events related to clinical trials, regulatory decisions, competition.
As we already discussed, Verastem is right in the middle of that FDA approval process.
With a decision expected by June.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's definitely adding to the uncertainty and the volatility,
And then there's also things like year-end tax loss selling.
which can definitely impact stock prices towards the end of the year.
Yeah, some investors might be selling off their losing stocks to offset capital gains and reduce their tax burden,
So that selling pressure can push prices down.
especially in the fourth quarter.
Okay. So with that market backdrop in mind, let's shift our focus back to Verastem. We talked about the analyst upgrades, with several firms raising their price targets.
Yeah.
Is there anything more we should unpack there?
I think it's significant that multiple analysts have become more bullish on Verastem.
Right.
They're essentially saying that they believe the company is currently undervalued.
Based on its potential.
Yeah. Especially in light of that upcoming FDA decision.
And as we mentioned earlier, BTIG was particularly optimistic.
Yeah, they doubled their price target from $13 to $20.
What's driving that level of confidence, do you think?
Well, remember, analyst opinions are based on a whole bunch of factors.
Right.
Like their assessment of the company's financials, the potential market for their product, the competitive landscape,
Okay.
and their overall outlook for the industry. It's important to keep in mind, though, that these are just opinions.
Right. They're not guarantees.
Exactly. It's always best to do your own research and form your own conclusions.
Now let's dive into Verastem's financials a little deeper. We know they're not profitable yet, but they do have a pretty solid cash reserve. How significant is that for a company at their stage?
For a biotech company like Verastem, having enough cash is absolutely crucial.
Why is that?
Well, it allows them to keep operating,
Okay.
to fund their clinical trials,
Right.
and to prepare for a potential product launch.
If and when their drug gets approved.
Exactly. Bringing a new drug to market is a very expensive process.
Yeah, it's not cheap.
So having over $100 million in cash on hand is a big plus for Verastem.
It gives them a cushion.
Yeah. It gives them a buffer to deal with setbacks.
Right.
And it allows them to focus on their goals without having to constantly scramble for funding.
Which can be a distraction.
And it can also dilute the value of existing shares.
So beyond cash, what else can you tell us about Verastem's overall financial health?
Well, their most recent earnings report showed a net loss of $24 million for the quarter.
Oh.
And their EBITDA,
Which stands for?
earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization.
Right, a measure of operating profitability.
Right. And their EBITDA is negative.
So they're spending more than they're bringing in.
Yes. But that's not uncommon for biotech companies in this stage of development.
They're investing heavily in research and development.
Exactly. They're hoping to see a return on that investment down the road when they have a successful product on the market.
So it's kind of a mixed bag when it comes to their financials.
Yeah, there are some positives, like that strong cash position, but they are still operating at a loss.
So what's the key takeaway for investors?
Well, I think the key takeaway is that Verastem is a high-risk, high-reward kind of investment.
Okay.
If their drug gets approved and it sells well, their stock could really take off.
But there's also a chance things won't go as planned.
Right.
And the stock could drop.
So investors need to carefully consider their own risk tolerance.
And their overall investment goals.
Exactly. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about some technical indicators. We touched on moving averages earlier.
Right.
But what are some other signals investors should be looking at?
Well, one popular indicator is the RSI.
the relative strength index.
Exactly.
That helps you gauge whether a stock is overbought or oversold.
And where does Verastem's RSI stand right now?
It's currently hovering around 49.
So what does that tell us? Is it a buy signal?
Not quite. An RSI of 49 basically suggests that Verastem's stock is in neutral territory.
So it could go up or down from here.
Right. It's not showing any strong momentum in either direction.
Okay. So we can't really draw any firm conclusions from the RSI alone.
Right. We need to look at other indicators as well.
So what else is there?
Another one worth considering is the AVD.
The moving average convergence divergence?
Exactly. It's a momentum indicator that looks at the relationship between two moving averages of a stock's price.
Okay. And what's Verastem's MACD telling us right now?
Interestingly enough, it's currently flashing a bearish signal.
What does that mean?
It means the short-term moving average has crossed below the long-term moving average.
Which can be a sign that the stock might be headed for a downturn.
It can be, yeah.
Well, hold on. Didn't we say earlier that the short-term trends for Verastem were looking bullish?
We did, but that's why it's so important to look at multiple indicators.
Right, because they can sometimes paint conflicting pictures.
Exactly. The MACD is focusing on the relationship between those moving averages, while the overall price action might still be showing some upward momentum in the short term.
So it's a bit of a tug-of-war between different signals.
Right, and that's the challenge, and also the intrigue of technical analysis.
You have to weigh all the evidence.
Yeah, and try to see how different signals fit together.
It's like solving a puzzle.
Exactly. So we've got mixed signals from the technical indicators. What other factors should investors be thinking about when they're evaluating Verastem?
Well, I think the competitive landscape is an important one. Verastem is operating in a very specific niche within oncology.
That's true.
They're targeting KRAS mutant LGSOC.
Right. And while they could be the first company to bring a treatment specifically for that type of cancer to market, there's always a chance that competitors will emerge down the line.
So even if they get FDA approval, their success is not guaranteed.
It's not. They'll need to come up with a smart pricing strategy. They'll need to demonstrate strong clinical efficacy. They'll need to make sure their drug has a good safety profile, and they'll need to market it effectively.
Right. We've covered a lot of ground here. We've looked at the news surrounding Verastem, their progress in developing their new drug, the FDA approval process, the overall market context, analyst opinions, their financial health, the technical indicators, and the competitive landscape.
A very thorough overview.
But before we move on, I think it's worth pausing to consider some of the bigger picture implications of Verastem's potential success.
Okay. What do you mean?
Well, I'm thinking beyond the financial impact. What could their success mean for the field of oncology as a whole?
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, if Verastem's treatment for LGSOC gets approved, and if it proves to be effective in clinical practice, it could have a ripple effect throughout the field.
How so?
Well, for one thing, it would validate their approach to targeting KRAS mutations, which has been a really tough nut to crack for researchers.
So other companies might be encouraged to invest in this area.
Exactly. And that could lead to even more new treatments for other types of cancer.
That would be amazing.
It would. And secondly, Verastem's success could help advance the whole field of personalized medicine.
How so?
Well, LGSOC is a relatively rare form of cancer, and their treatment is designed specifically for patients who have KRAS mutations.
So it's a more targeted approach.
Exactly. It's moving away from that one-size-fits-all model.
Which is how we've traditionally treated cancer.
Right. And that shift toward more personalized therapies could have a big impact on how we diagnose and treat cancer in the future.
So even though Verastem is a relatively small company,
yeah,
their work could have a huge impact.
Absolutely. They're pioneers in a lot of ways, and they're definitely a company to watch.
All right, so to sum up, we've taken a deep dive into Verastem. We've explored their potential, and we've highlighted both the risks and the rewards.
Right. Now it's up to you to do your own research.
Look at all the information.
And decide if Verastem is the right investment for you.
Remember, this is just a snapshot of where Verastem stands today.
Things can change quickly in the biotech world.
So it's important to stay informed and to keep track of any new developments.
Especially as we get closer to that FDA decision date in June.
Now we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on Verastem after hearing our analysis?
Do you think it's a good investment opportunity?
Or are the risks too high for you?
Let us know in the comments below.
We're always interested in hearing what our listeners think.
We love having these conversations.
So don't be shy. Share your thoughts.
And if you enjoyed this episode of Investing Talk Podcast, be sure to subscribe.
And share it with your friends.
And leave a comment.
Thanks for listening.
Welcome back to Investing Talk Podcast.
Wrapping up our conversation about Verastem, ticker symbol VSTM.
All right, so we've gone through a lot.
We have.
Looked at Verastem from all angles.
Tried to get a sense of what's going on.
And I think the question everyone's asking is
it a buy?
Is it a buy? Should I invest in Verastem?
That's the big question, right?
And as we've been discussing, it's not a simple answer.
No, it's not. There are definitely some things working in Verastem's favor.
Like what?
Well, they've got this potentially game-changing treatment for a really tough type of cancer.
Right.
They've got the FDA's attention with that priority review status. And the analysts seem pretty optimistic about their chances.
Yeah, they're raising their price targets, giving them buy ratings.
And, of course, they've got that healthy cash position to keep things running.
Right. They're not strapped for cash.
No, they've got a decent runway. But
there are also risks to consider.
Always, with any investment.
Especially in biotech.
It's a volatile sector.
Very volatile.
And Verastem is not profitable yet.
They're still in the red.
So there's a chance that things could go south.
The FDA could reject their drug.
They could run into unexpected problems.
The competition could heat up.
There are a lot of unknowns.
That's the nature of investing.
It is. So is Verastem a buy? The answer is...
It depends.
It always depends.
It depends on your individual situation.
Your risk tolerance.
Your investment goals.
Your time horizon.
If you're someone who can't stomach a lot of risk, if you're looking for slow and steady growth,
then Verastem might not be the right fit for you.
But if you're comfortable with a little more risk,
if you're looking for those potential big wins,
then Verastem might be worth a closer look.
But the key is...
do your own research.
Don't just take our word for it.
Don't just rely on the analysts.
Read the company's filings.
Look at their financials.
Understand their business model.
And, most importantly...
don't invest more than you can afford to lose.
Absolutely. That's rule number 1 of investing.
It is. Now, we've given you a lot to think about today.
We've tried to cover all the bases.
But this is just the beginning.
Investing is an ongoing process.
You're always learning.
Always adapting.
So stay curious.
Stay informed.
And never stop asking questions.
We want to hear from you.
What are your thoughts on Verastem?
Are you bullish? Are you bearish?
Let us know in the comments.
We love hearing from our listeners.
And if you enjoyed this episode of Investing Talk Podcast,
be sure to subscribe.
Share it with your friends.
And leave us a comment.
Thanks for tuning in.
We'll see you next time.